Soul Journey of Life on social media.
This is an awakening.
Snap out of it! Thought-provoking, challenging the popular perspectives, critical of today's opinions. We go all the way in deep. What's a thought's worth if thoughts must conform to ill-conceived theories and so-called orthodox beliefs, twisted opinions of hypocrisy? How do we reach new heights? Ascend to higher realizations, activate the powers of abstract reasoning? We must break the chains that hold us down from celestial flights. Face what you think you know with what you have yet to know. For the moment, never mind how you believe things ought to be. We must revolutionize our minds for there to be a clear way to unify. For that to happen, we must have a seat at the table all over again. Just making sure the light works. Unlock the keys of scrutiny. Revive what it means to pursue knowledge. Manifest the God in we, you and me. Welcome to your wake-up call. Soul Journey of Life. Conscious Black social media. The light dome.
Hello everyone, my name is John Harvey.
And my name is Eleanor Harvey.
Of J. Harvey Realty Company. We are located at 15704 Waterloo Road in Cleveland, Ohio, in the Waterloo District. We have been in business for 32 years. There is nothing no greater than helping people secure the American dream, a home. We have also helped many investors buy income properties. We specialize in helping people get prepared to purchase homes by getting them pre-approved. When they start looking, they will be able to purchase their home. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, think J. Harvey Realty Company.
Abdul Wadud, aka Questman, coming at you live again. Soul Journey of Life, Conscious Black social media. It's been a little while, but we're back on the clock with the Black We Speak. And tonight we intend to get into a bit of reading again, commentation included. As you can see by the title, tonight's reading is going to be going over the book titled The Dead Are Arising, The Life of Malcolm X by Payne, Tamara Payne. So we're going to go into that. I also want to put to your your attention that later on this evening, I do have another live to do for the Midnight Thought Talk. I have to deal with some matters because anytime something involves the, standing up and representing our people, our cause, our narration, our story, our legacy, and anytime I feel like someone of other peoples, non-melanated peoples, is speaking in a way that belittles, lessens, or makes small the gravity of what many of our ancestors have gone through and continue to go through, then I feel compelled to have to speak or talk about it. So I intend to tackle that issue um, later this evening, Midnight Thought Talk. So if you are still awake by that time, make sure you check back in 12 a.m. midnight tonight. That one is the one that if you look, you'll see is titled Midnight Thought Talk. When snakes are allowed in, things white people don't get a free pass with saying. Okay, so that's later on tonight. And if you look at the description of that one, you'll get a better idea of what that is going to be dealing with, or at least some of the basis of what it's going to be dealing with. So, let's tackle the matter at hand. We are, as the title implies, and by the way, if I didn't say it already, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, shalom, peace and blessings. Many of you may be aware that there are those of us uh, who are fasting, who are practicing what's called siyam. That is the fast of the month of Ramadan. And so, to those who are participating in that, I simply say to you, as I say to those who are near, Ramadan Mubarak. And may Allah, the Most High, Most Wise, give you a blessing, a goodly reward for your efforts in partaking in the Siyam of this sacred month. Now, Malcolm X. Malcolm X. Let me put this here. I got a question, and it might seem, you know, not so much rocket science or whatnot, but it's a sincere question. When did you first learn about the late Honorable Malcolm X? When was the first time you ever heard about him? That you learned about him, you started to read up on him and get an idea that this person was somebody that we needed to know. This was a an icon that we needed to make sure that we learned about. When was your first encounter with learning about Brother Malcolm X? Um, Personally, if I go back in time, I believe that my first encounter is somewhere colliding with when I started to learn about Marcus Garvey and Noble Drew Ali. So, and I'm like a brainiac anyway, right? So I dig the deep sciences and things like that, right? I like to get into some of that, the tablets, you name it. I was in all that, the Browder files, um, and through the course of that journey, um, I can remember, uh, hearing about Malcolm X. I think I may have been like 12 years old. I can't recall the exact age. I think yeah. I started to get. You mentioned when the movie came out. You'd be surprised at how many people that was the first time um, they were acquainted with Malcolm X. Um, I could say that when the movie came out, that kind of revived my interest in Malcolm X because I'm like, hey, there's a movie about this brother. I need to see this. The movie by Alex Haley. Let me share that uh screen right there about that. Alex Haley. Is this it? Yeah. Right here you see brother Malcolm sitting there chopping it up with Alex Haley as he's breaking down his autobiography. So um anyway, during that time I can say that I was in a kind of a combative mode. I felt like people, I acknowledged that, racism existed. In fact, it was more during that time when I was 12 that I started to understand that that's what I was experiencing. Because prior to that, I had experiences growing up, but I didn't know that it was racism. Like when I was 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, I could remember I was with some people because I've grown up. I've had some orphan life in my upbringing. And, in one case, I was with a lady who had adopted me in and taken me to her church. And, I was kind of offended to that. But, what can a little 10-year-old say, right? To that. When you do what you're told, basically, when you're 8, 9, and 10. And so I can remember sitting in the seat and everybody's getting up, singing and clapping. This is a predominantly white church that I was sitting in. Predominant, not all. There was some speckles of pepper here and there, you understand. But I can remember sitting there and the pastor of the church looking directly at me and saying, "Brother, come up here, come up here." And I was confused because I didn't even know he was talking to me. So I'm looking behind me like, like who is he talking to? He's talking to me like, "Yeah, you brother, come on up here." So I'm like, and that was kind of stage fright a little bit, but I kind of, I've had some experience. I did some talent shows and stuff, so that kind of didn't make me too much stage fright, but I was kind of nervous. Like, why does he want me to come up here? So I went up there and he put his arm around me and then looked at the congregation, and he was like, um, "Well, this brother is no different than any of us. He believes in Jesus and he's saved." And he just went on, and I'm standing there thinking to myself like, hold up, what's going on here? Why he pulled me out like this to talk about this? Why he explain this? Why did he say this like this? And then after the service, everybody was shaking my hand like I done did something grand, right? And I'm like, why is everybody shaking my hand? Why are they shaking this person's hand? Or this what what did I do that made them want to shake my hand? And then I thought about what the pastor had done. He pulled me out of all the people. I probably stood out like a sore thumb, just like I did when I played football in middle school. I was the only. You didn't. If I showed you my football team picture, I gotta find it somewhere. I got it somewhere. If I showed you the picture, you already know who I am on the team. I don't even have to tell you. I just show you the picture. You know who I am on the team, and you understand why. I was the only brother on the entire team, wide receiver. Um. Anyway, so I thought about, well, if I'm so much like everyone else, I believe in Jesus and blah blah blah. If I'm like that, then why'd you have to pull me out to make a point out of it? That's what I was asking, thinking to myself. Why'd you have to make a point out of it if I'm just like everyone else? Then I can remember, actually, that was my second racial experience, but that was my first one that kind of made me think about what was going on. The first one I was more innocent with, where a neighbor child who was about my age, I think we were both about 8 years old, came up to his mother and says, Mommy, why does he look like that? And I'm looking at myself like, did I spill something? Did something land on me? What happened? What happened? So he's like, why does he look like that? And then I guess his mom just understood what he was talking about and says, well, God likes variety, which didn't immediately make any sense to me. I'm like, variety? What's the variety? What makes he's like me, right? This is my neighborhood friend. What's the variety that she's talking about? So that kind of, I remember it, but I didn't really tackle it. I just kind of like, okay, God likes variety. Cool. So I went on about my day. But it was at that one moment at that church that I identified that racism exists. When I was pulled out in front of all of the congregation, only to be told that I'm just like everyone else, I believe in Jesus and da 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 da, I'm like, wait a minute. again, I don't understand why he had to pull me out to make this point. So that was a weird experience. And I had some other ones after that. We went down to uh, was it Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and some other places that I had to experience. You know, the hidden talk, the what do you call it, coded talk that they do sometimes when they want to crack jokes, and you're trying to figure out, well, who's this joke about? Then you put two and two together and you realize you're the only one that fits the script of the essence of their joke. I'm like, okay. So as I got older and through these times, I experienced some things, and then I remembered back when my father got into a fight with cops. I remember when the guy took off his badge and my father beat the guy down. But that's one of the reasons why I had always had a respect for my father, because I felt like he was a warrior. I always saw him making things happen out of nothing, just making it happen, right? And so in those days, you didn't have smartphones, you didn't have any of that. So any number of things could have gone wrong with my father in that situation. Um, I mean, of course, he did, experience a mysterious homicide years later when I turned about, a little over 5 years old. But my point is I saw him going through these bouts or whatnot and arguments and experiences with these people. And when I went back and reflected upon that, I was like, my father was dealing with racism. He was a victim or challenged with systemic racism, and I never thought about it until later on in my life. Um, and that may be what took his life, because the person who took his life wasn't someone who really even knew him. It was like a a, a coincidental meeting somehow, so to speak. I don't coincidence, whatever. But the guy wasn't like someone he knew, like they kicked it or he met him somewhere. This was literally somebody that wasn't even on his radar of someone to be concerned with. Anyway, so as I got older, um, like I said, I began to read and study and become more studious and I wanted to become more knowledgeable in the things that I believed in. You understand? For example, one of the things that I had believed in at a young age, um, for me, that was always evident, was the oneness of the Most High, and in the manifestation of the presence of the Most High in I, right? And wherever I turn my face, these are values or principles that I hold on to this day. And I remember, people would always try to question me and ask me, why don't you believe it like this? Why don't you believe that? I'm like, well, I have a hard time believing that the person that you've got hanging there is who I should be bowing down to. Something's wrong with this picture. You're telling me that this person who's hanging right here, who's dying, somehow is my originator, and he don't look nothing like me. He has no resemblance to me, but you're telling me this is my originator. Okay. And I had a bunch of other questions, so I started digging in. I started researching. I started, just masterminding the Bible. Um, you know, researching Quranic references and just all kinds of literature. Like I said, Noble Drew Ali, Clarence X, Elijah Muhammad, Message to the Black Man. I was books, 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 books. And it just seemed like the more I was digging in, the more I needed more. I was never satisfied with just what was given. It's like there's answers. I've got answers and I need more. I would go to the library back in the days before you had Google search and all that, and what's it, Bing. I'd go into the library and just ace encyclopedias and whatnot, from dinosaurs to electricity to computers, you name it. I'm reading about it. I'm trying to figure out what this is that I'm existing in and what this is that I am, why I look like I look. Why am I melanated? It's not enough for you to, oh, brother, you're melanated. You're part of the melanated people. You descend from these people. That's not enough for me. I've got questions. Why am I this and they that? So, and why are they treating me like this? Because I'm this and not that. What's the deal? So anyway, long story short, as all my stories tend to be long, Malcolm X came about. And like I said, I was dealing with reading about and learning about Marcus Garvey during the time. Because I can remember I was reading about his organization and the ship that he bought, the import export ship that he bought for the melanated community, and then I came across Elijah Muhammad uh, sending messages to Malcolm X, and like I said, I was acquainted to the message to the black man then, and I was moved that the brother Malcolm X, the way his oratory was. I'm like, wow, this person is just blazing these guys that he's talking to. I mean, you see, you have these interviews, and he's just like boom, 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 you know. And I didn't see that before, because Elijah Muhammad was more of a chill spokesperson or a chill speaker. He didn't really have. I mean, he had some like angry type talks, but it wasn't like like a machine gun. You understand? It was more just it was like a needle. You understand? Elijah Muhammad is like a needle where you're going to get the pain, but it's going to be injected into you slowly, and you will just slowly deteriorate from the damage that comes from the power of Elijah Muhammad's words. But Malcolm X was like, he took all that, compiled it into bullets, atomic bombs, and just started blazing folks. So that moved me, and I needed to know more about Malcolm X. So by that time the movie came out, like the sister was saying here in the chat, the movie came out, and I definitely had to go and see it. You understand? I had to see what how they put the movie. I had seen, let's see, I'm trying to think of what came before. I can't remember if I watched The Roots before or Malcolm X before, but for some reason I feel like I watched The Roots before by Alex Haley. So when I saw, because when I saw this movie was produced by Alex Haley, that kind of made me interested as well. Let's see here. So yeah, we're not. I don't feel that we are dealing with, like an imposter type of personality when you speak about Malcolm X. To me, he is everything of a revolutionary. You understand? And I say is instead of was, because for me, his legacy still continues through many of our veins to this day. I mean, when we see things go down, it's like that Malcolm X spirit rises up in us. Like, look, this can't go down this way. We got to do something. Somebody, we need answers. Somebody's getting knocked out. Something's got to happen because of the racism that we just got done seeing in such a situation. That's how we started feeling like, look, we're not these other folks anymore. We're not, singing "We Shall Overcome" and "Kumbaya" up and down the sidewalks. We're a different breed of folk. So then, got another question for you. Today, in today's time, who could you say? Could you tell me any examples of who you would say represents the cause enough to where you could compare him or her with Brother Malcolm X? Who in our time has demonstrated the character or caliber of one like Malcolm X? I mean, and we're in a time where, I mean, shoot. Hold on, so let me turn this off right there. We're in a time where authenticity is being craved, but it's in short supply. You understand? Or because of what authenticity means, a lot of real thoroughbred brothers and sisters aren't trying to come out into the camera scene, which I can respect. But sometimes we see things go down, and you wonder, well, where are the soldiers at? Where are the brothers and sisters who are about that shut this down mentality? I mean, we see them marching and the banners going on and say, if we don't get justice, we're going to shut this down. I'm waiting for something to get shut down. You understand? I understand that we have to be strategic and this, that, and the other, but it's a whole nother thing when we actually do something. I saw an example of this. I mean, I know there's some brothers and sisters that don't agree, that don't think this is an example, but for me it is. When I saw the boots on the ground in Louisville, Kentucky, and I saw those brothers suited and booted, geared up, marching down the streets of Louisville, Kentucky, and marching down the streets of or up the streets of Stone Mountain. These are the brothers that are known as the NFAC, led by Grandmaster Jay. So for me, I saw somebody doing something that bears merit, because the minute you pick up an actual weapon and you move across the land, anything can go down. You understand? The minute you pick up a weapon, one ancient person said, don't pick up a weapon, don't equip your weapon if you don't intend on using it. You understand? Don't even if you have no intention of using it, don't even pick it up. So the fact that those brothers and sisters picked up their weapons, their swords, suited and booted, meant that they had the mindset, if anything goes down, you know what time it is. If anything goes down, anything could go down, anything could have went wrong, and especially in states where things have already happened. You had the Breonna Taylor, things already happened. You understand? So in so many ways, that was like the soldiers in the black community putting it to the face of the establishment. They're like, look, we see you, we see what you're doing. Yes, and Ahmaud Aubery, yes indeed. So to me, that's an example. That's an example of people who aren't just living on YouTube in the modern day and age, but where you see them out there, where their lives are really truly on the line. All those, I think it was like 5,000, 3,000, 5,000 brothers and sisters, all of their lives were on the line the minute they rode up down there with their equipment. Their lives were on the line. Anything could have gone down. So for me, that was courageous. That was very a bold statement. You understand? A very bold statement. So that's as close as I've seen in our day and age. I'm talking about in my own life, in our day and age, of someone and entities, groups that are of this caliber of Malcolm X that we're talking about here now. So I mean, there's some other people I could think of. Some of them were kind of before my time. I salute Khalid Muhammad. That's another person who I think was, I believe, was truly thorough. And when I'm saying thorough, I mean that these individuals, on off camera, they are who they are. You understand? They are who they are. And I actually had the opportunity to meet brother Grandmaster Jay, for example. So I was able to actually be a character witness. There's no camera around. I actually had an opportunity to be, uh, you know, have private conversation with the brother. No cameras. Character remaining the same character that you saw on midnight, midday muses, on morning mentals and facts over field. The same character, same personality, no changing up in any kind of way. You understand? No changing up, same character. Something to respect, because that's hard to see in today's time. Like I said, I see some brothers on these mics talking and whatnot. talking a good game, talking about what needs to happen. We need to do this, we need to do that. But then when the mics and camera goes off, you don't see nobody doing anything. You don't see nobody doing anything. And the only time you might see them is when there's a photo op moment. When there's a moment for them to get on the scene. Here's this scene behind them. Oh, see, here we are. Photo op moment. But nobody really doing anything. You understand? Few really doing anything. So yeah, there are many who claim the banner of being a revolutionary. But are they demonstrating the authenticity of the likes of Brother Malcolm X? You know, I can remember seeing some of the old clips. I don't see them a lot nowadays on YouTube, but them old clips of him walking down the street by himself. No bodyguards, no nothing. Walking down the street, and he had this real stern persona. You understand? Like you're not gonna mess with this brother. He ain't trying to play any games. He's not on any of the silliness. He's got places to go, businesses to do, things to do, businesses to get to. That's the kind of character that, you know, for me, that I interpret out of Malcolm X. You don't see that breed of brothers and sisters too much anymore. You understand? You don't see too much of that anymore. People making things happen. You know, in that movie that the sister was talking about, you had a scene where the officers complaining because, you know, the brother had commanded a whole, you know, what do you want to call it? A whole flank of followers, soldiers, supporters to move, to stop and move. And he was like, "Oh, that's too much power for one man to have. That's too much power. Who's moving people like that? Who's got power like that? If we had power like that today, I'm telling you, we wouldn't even need to be talking about reparations or anything right now. We would be sitting here drinking our coffee paid for by the reparations that we are enjoying. But instead, somewhere along the way, a significant number of us got either deceived, hogwash, hoodwinked, fooled, spooked, so that we don't move in the way that anything instinctively would move on the planet Earth. Even a mouse will try to do something to get out and get away from its oppressor. Even a mouse. But we'll come out of the dark, out of the shadows, and shake the hand of the oppressor and try to be their friend and hope that they will treat us nicely next time. Only while we're shaking their hand to get another episode on the nightly news of someone else's head getting bashed in, getting hung and strung up, getting choked out. Again and again and again, and we watch it like it's a movie or something anymore. So I wonder, if Brother Malcolm X were alive today, how would his reception be? How would his reception be? What you're seeing on the screen right now is the book we are going to be dealing with. Can I make that bigger? Yes, I can. Let's do this. There you go. The Dead Are Rising, The Life of Malcolm X. The Life of Malcolm X. All right. And we're going to be getting into that. Okay. I want to encourage you, by the way, speaking of which, because many of you might not know that the reason that I'm reading this book is because I was recommended to read this book. I was recommended to read this book by our respected brother, Grandmaster J, who, if you aren't aware of this fact right now, he is behind bars, a victim of systemic racism, a victim of systemic racism, a victim of injustice in this systemic racist system.
meaning that those who despise our very presence in this world and who will go to any measures to spin a tale, to corrupt, to bring out lies, to paint you falsely, so long as it hems you up. These people, you understand, these people have put our brother behind bars. And, and that after series of, you know, uh, reschedulings of hearings again and again and again, until finally they brought about this bogus trial where just anybody was able to get up there and say anything, and it flies. And the very same people, many of the very same people, family, are now being charged and investigated. Many of the very same people who had uh, got this brother behind bars are persons of interest, are being investigated. So we are going to read this book because, at this particular time, this is the same book that the brother himself is reading. So our ideals are to be on one accord. You understand? To be on one accord. So we're going to read a portion of this today. I can't cover too much time because, as I mentioned, I do have a live following this live, and you'll see that on my channel. And I got to make sure I have enough energy and time to deal with that, because I've got to deal with that problem as well. The dead are rising. The dead are arising. The life of Malcolm X. So let's I'm going to get that screen up here. All right. Let's do this. There it is. Boom. All right, family. The dead are rising. The dead are arising. So if you don't have this is, as you can see, this is a PDF version of it, so it is available in PDF form. I believe if you just type it up, just like you see right there, you'll see some PDF formats. There's several sites that has it, but there's also a hard copy that I saw, I believe, on Amazon.com. So it's out there, and there may be some other sources that have the book as well. So we're going to go in. We are going to go in. Give me a second here. Just want to switch that around. There we go. And by the way, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And also, I'm going to encourage you. By the way, let me do this real quick. I'm going to encourage you. If you look at the bottom of the screen there, you can see under the Asante Sana, you can see the Cash App. And I'm putting that in your face because your support does make a difference, and your support is definitely being petitioned at this point in time, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and every element of support does make all the difference. And in advance, I say to you, Asante Sana, there's the Cash App. Look out for your family. Let's see here. Let's go back to this. Okay. So the dead are rising. And we are going to begin. So we're going to at least be able to deal with some of chapter 1, Born Against the Current. But I do want to take a look at this introduction, because I thought there was some interesting elements being talked about here. Introduction by Tamara Payne. When my father, Les Payne, began his research in 1990 for The Dead Are Arising, Malcolm X was very much alive in the consciousness of the black community. Walking down Harlem's 125th Street, you would hear Malcolm's emphatic voice resounding from the speakers of sidewalk vendors selling his speeches, and you would see his countenance emblazoned on t-shirts. This generation of hip hop embraced Malcolm X because he spoke directly to them. His messages provided clear, direct analysis of what was happening around them in their communities. Point by point, he outlined how state-sanctioned racism is not new, but a continuation of the coordinated destruction of black people in America. Malcolm changed the way they viewed themselves and gave voice to their struggles. Numerous rappers and activists quoted Malcolm in their lyrics and interviews on radio and television. Malcolm also changed the way Les Payne viewed himself. As a college student in 1963, he had heard Malcolm speak in Hartford, Connecticut. On that June night, my father came face to face with his own self-loathing. Malcolm X addressed the race issue head on. "Now I know you don't want to be called black," he said. "You want to be called Negro. But what does Negro mean except black in Spanish? So what you are saying is, it's okay to call me black in Spanish, but don't call me black in English." Later in the night I stopped being called a Negro, an essay that was first published in the collection titled When Race Becomes Real, Payne wrote that he had entered Bushnell Hall as a Negro with a capital N and wandered out into the parking lot as a black man. Born in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Payne had moved to Hartford with his mother and two brothers at age 12. "I'd never met a white person, South or North, who did not feel comfortably superior to every Negro, no matter the rank or station. Conversely, no Negro I'd met or heard of had ever felt truly equal to whites. For all their polemical posturing, not even Baldwin, Martin Luther King Jr., or the great Richard Wright, with all his crossed up feelings, had liberated themselves from the poisoned weed of black self-loathing with its deeply entangled roots in the psyche." The lightning strike of Malcolm's sword released the conditioned sense of Negro inferiority that was housed in the college junior psyche. Hearing Malcolm's piercing analysis forced him to think about the Jim Crow South he was born into. Remembering how he was told that Negroes were just as good as whites, but seeing Negroes rise only to janitors, cooks, cotton pickers, not to landlords or owners of lumber yards. By the end of the lecture, Payne was irrevocably changed. Whites were no longer superior, were no longer inferior, he wrote. Always inspired by Malcolm X, Payne would reread his dog-eared copy of the autobiography every 5 years. So he was naturally curious when his high school buddy Walter O. Evans, who had become a successful surgeon in Detroit, introduced him to Philbert Little, one of Malcolm X's brothers. Payne discussed this meeting with Jill Noble, a friend and fellow journalist who at the time hosted the weekly Sunday show Like It Is on WABC TV in New York. In addition to his work as a renowned broadcaster, Noble was an admirer of Malcolm X. Every year he dedicated episodes of Like It Is to the life and assassination of Malcolm X. Noble suggested that Payne also meet Wilfred Little, Malcolm's oldest brother and best friend. At the time, Payne was an editor at Newsday, a daily newspaper on Long Island. He had won a Pulitzer Prize In 1974, as part of a reporting team investigating the international flow of heroin from the poppy seed fields of Turkey through the French Connection and into the veins of New York drug addicts. He was renowned for his investigative persistence and his skill in obtaining the truth from reluctant sources. As he often told his three children, Jamal, Haley, and myself, he could not abide the phrase, "We may never know." Oh, pardon there. I went up too much there. After sitting down in Detroit with the two siblings, he was shocked to realize how much he did not know about the man whom he admired and studied. Hold on a second here, because it's not letting me see that bottom piece. There we go. Okay. For such a persistent seeker of the true story, the fact that so much remained unknown about Malcolm proved irresistible. It set my father on a journey that, now we can go to the next page, would last 28 years until his untimely death in 2018. It's not too long ago. Tracing Malcolm X's steps from the Nebraska cauldron he was born into, and the family life that shaped him, to the gunshots that would silence him forever, Payne traveled around the world, conducting hundreds of interviews with Malcolm's family members, childhood friends, classmates, buddies on the streets and in prison, as well as cops, bodyguards, FBI agents, drivers, informers, photographers, journalists, UN representatives, African revolutionaries, and presidents, sworn enemies, fake followers, and the two men falsely imprisoned for shooting him dead. As he tracked down how Malcolm became the person he was, he learned an extraordinary amount of biographical detail that was new. Even though much has been written about Malcolm in the years since Payne's investigation began, much that he found has never been told before or has been sketched only roughly, without the deeply reported detail and color that bring a life to life again. Applying his Pulitzer-level skills as an investigative reporter, Payne was mindful that even though Malcolm X told his story well, his and other published accounts are neither fully rendered nor entirely accurate. Accordingly, the reader will discover that key trails explored in The Dead Are Rising are less well trodden, and some details of Malcolm's sit down with the Ku Klux Klan, for example, were long considered unattainable. Through extensive interviewing and reporting, the reader is now brought in on this 1961 meeting around the kitchen table of Minister Jeremiah X in Atlanta. The Dead Are Rising sheds light on Earl Little's tragic death in 1931 and Malcolm's haunting, lifelong doubts about the official version are, after extensive investigation, squared with the facts. New details about the breakup of the family reveal the roles played by state institutions and insurance company, and young Malcolm himself, as his mother tried to care for her 8 children during the harshest years of the Depression, in the end crumbling in on herself. Instead of being the happy person when our father was alive, said one son, she was quiet. My mother stopped singing. The Dead Are Arising also provides a new portrait of the young man known as East Lansing Red, long before he was dubbed Detroit Red, as Malcolm started at age 12, hustled reefers from a neighbor's garden plot, and then became a sneak thief by the pilfering. I can't even speak right now because my daughter's decided to cry and complain. Pardon me. Give me a moment. I'm going to have to pause just for a moment. All right. So while I'm pausing, I'm going to leave this page right here and I'll be right back. Okay, I have returned. Pardon me for that. But when you're reading, you want to be able to read in some level or degree of quietness. And when you have mischievous little girls who like to cry when they're being told by their mother to do their homework, it calls for father to reemphasize what mother has asked daughter to do. Okay, that being done, we can continue. The Dead Are Rising also provides a new portrait of the young man known as East Lansing Red, long before he was dubbed Detroit Red, as Malcolm started at age 12, hustled reefers from a neighbor's garden plot, and then became a sneak thief by pilfering scarce cash even from his mother. Malcolm, oh, they keep doing this. Let me move that over here because it's getting in the way of the words. Malcolm never would deny that he stole. Recalled one of his brothers who had caught him red-handed he was not a liar. He was, however, reckless, and long before the Muslim days, Malcolm's craving for attention was chilling, as when he challenged a notorious Lansing cop holding a gun to his adolescent head. Go ahead, pull the trigger, Whitey. This biography will show readers in often astonishing detail how Malcolm, as the Nation of Islam's great proselytizer, fished for converts and built a disciplined chapter inciting a group of New England prospects to service in a cramped housing project apartment, while implicitly shaming clad the shorts clad daughter of the house with his called a modesty, away from media noise, the presence of the ever wary cops, the muscling of rivals, and even the coaxing of the Nation of Islam's leader Elijah Muhammad, we catch an early glimpse of how Malcolm would run things when left alone. Finally, the book provides readers with the moment-by-moment account of the February 1965 assassination, which is reconstructed with unparalleled vividness. Les Payne's sources here include the undercover New York City policeman whose testimony might have cleared two men who were unjustly sentenced for the murder and a member of the nation's Newark Goon Squad who provides an insider's account of the planning and immediate aftermath of the murder. This work, moreover, contextualizes Malcolm's life against the racial conflicts, violence, and aspirations of 20th century America. All of this history richly rendered. Along the way, The Dead Are Rising provides portraits of the Marcus Garvey movement that shaped young Malcolm's early life, the Nation of Islam organization that gave him direction when he came out of prison, and the Ku Klux Klan that he saw at one time as the most honest face of white America. Although Les Payne's investigation research revealed much that was new about Malcolm's life, his assessment of Malcolm's core message did not change. In a 1989 column, he wrote, "More than any other leader in the 1960s, Malcolm moved blacks to consider who they were and whence they came, and to plan for what they could become. He saw his people as a brutalized class who, after centuries of slavery and oppression, have been made to think of themselves and to act as inferiors, as niggers. To correct this condition, the black man could either work on the outer manifestation of discrimination, as did Martin Luther King, or change himself from within through transformation. Malcolm took the latter course, both in teaching and in his personal life on this planet. He underwent a dramatic conversion from street criminal to devout moralist and revolutionary. Along the way, Malcolm sought to upset the white man's grossly inflated sense of himself, his complacent arrogance and smugness. In rejecting the dominant society that had rejected him, he instructed his followers to reject the white man's ideas, values, and above all, the way he looked down upon blacks as inferiors. King offered racists the other cheek, Malcolm the back of his hand. Freedom was so important to him that Malcolm counseled risking all except one's sense of self-respect in the fight. Nonviolence, he taught, unduly narrowed and oppressed people's oppressed people's options. We have to change our mind about each other, Malcolm said often to his followers. Even as he tracked Malcolm X, Payne was busy at Newsday. He wrote a weekly syndicated column as an assistant managing editor. He was in charge of the daily newspaper's state, national, international, and science coverage. During the years he worked on this book, he supervised reporting that won 4 Pulitzer Prizes for coverage of genocide in Bosnia, U.S., friendly fire deaths in Iraq, Ebola in Zaire, now Democratic Republic of Congo, and the aftermath of genocide of Rwanda. Outside of Newsday, he participated in a weekly discussion panel on Sunday Edition, a popular CBS Sunday morning news show. In 1975, he helped to found the National Association of Black Journalists, which was organized to improve the number of black journalists overall in America. In 1975, he helped to found the National Association of Black Journalists, which was organized to improve the number of black journalists overall in America. To improve the treatment of black journalists already in the profession, to improve the coverage of the black community and the third world community, explained Payne, we had to organize and challenge the industry of journalism, confront and demand these things because black people read newspapers, black people watched television, Plus, a lot of the information the media puts out about black people is distorted. And then in 1992, he helped to found the Trotter Group of black columnists, named after William Monroe Trotter, a black journalist and editor of the Boston Guardian. Trotter was thrown out of the White House in 1914 for arguing with President Wilson against the policy of segregating federal officers. In addition to organizing black columnists, the Trotter Group met with both President Clinton and President Obama during their terms in office. Some 50 years after William Trotter's White House incident, Payne started his career in journalism as a federal employee of a sort. After graduating from the University of Connecticut, he spent 6 years in the U.S. Army as a ranger, serving as an information officer in Vietnam for General William Westmoreland, where Payne ran the Army newspaper. In 1969, attired in his captain's uniform, he applied for a job at Newsday, where he stayed until his retirement in 2006. But at every stage of his life, he confronted racism. When I was a rookie reporter, he later recalled, my young daughter asked why there are no blacks among Newsday's 102 summer interns in 1973. I shot off a note to management demanding an explanation. The reason I gave Tommy, I wrote in my note to Newsday, was that her daddy worked for a very racist newspaper. Give me a second here. Okay. As the young daughter cited here, I have worked on this book as a researcher since its earliest days. In a meeting with Faith Childs, his literary agent, Payne shared his experience of meeting the two little brothers. He was intrigued by what he had learned from them. It was at this meeting he decided to write The Dead Are Rising. The title refers to Malcolm's description of conversion into the Nation of Islam. Before they joined the Nation of Islam, members were dead because they did not know their true selves. Elijah Muhammad's teachings, particularly those aimed at strengthening black communities through improving their diet and removing distractions of prostitution, gambling, drugs, and alcohol, enabled members to free themselves from the false sense of inferiority imposed by the larger society. Malcolm continued his work on eradicating this inferiority complex after he left the Nation of Islam until his death. This work remains unfinished. Embarking on this journey, Payne continued working at Newsday. The Dead Are Rising became one of the more project he had to manage. Became one more project he had to manage. He hired Paul Lee, a professional researcher who had dedicated much of his career in archiving accurate records about Malcolm's life and work. Payne also brought on Elizabeth Bass, a longtime colleague and trusted friend, as an editor. Bass had worked for him as the science and health editor at Newsday. She also has served as Newsday's deputy national editor and deputy foreign editor. Over the next 28 years, this team worked with my father to bring this book together. Les Payne's untimely death on March 19, 2018, left both his immediate and his larger family devastated. In my sorrow and disbelief, I knew that the final work of his life's work, as he would refer to this book, had to be completed. Assisting in tracking down many of those who were interviewed for this book, I have also transcribed most of my interviews. My father had also brought me along on some of the interviews. Meeting Malcolm's associates and family members over the years and watching Les Payne's investigative techniques at work have been the unique reward of a lifetime for me. My many discussions with him about how this work was taking shape proved to be invaluable in the finishing of the manuscript. As the co-pilot and co-navigator, I could confidently and successfully complete this part of the journey. The manuscript was mostly finished by the time of his death, with the help and support of my family, Faith Childs, Elizabeth Bass, Robert Wheel, and Liverwright W. Norton, and countless others, I was able to bring the manuscript to the desired end. I was thankfully able to follow my father's lead as he tracked Malcolm's steps in his words from street criminal to devout moralist and revolutionary. The star down there says, in America, the surname for black people usually is that of the slave owners and does not reflect the African family heritage. Therefore, members of the Nation of Islam changed their surname to X, which stands for the unknown. If there is more than one person with the same first name in the Nation of Islam temple or mosque, a numeral is placed before the X, representing the number of people with that name that precede them, such as Charles 37X or Benjamin 7X. That's interesting to know. Part 1, family, 1925 to 1936, or 1939. 1925 to 1939. Chapter 1, Born Against the Current. The metallic clicking of hoof beats on the gravel road drew 5-year-old Wilford to the small pane window. His mother, wiping her hands, hurried to the front door as a group of horsemen with flickering torches rolled up to their wood-framed home on the outskirts of Omaha, Nebraska. "Little," yelled one of the half-dozen men. Lewis Little said that her husband was not at home. And with the tree leaves rustling in the evening breeze, the horsemen steadied their mounts in front of in the front yard and declared that they were the knights of the Ku Klux Klan. "Get that nigger out here now," one of the strangers shouted. Haltingly, a young housewife, precise in her West Indian accent, said that her family did not cause trouble or bother neighbors, that they minded their own business. The excitement of the horses died down for young Wilford as his mother folded her arms. Seen against the flickering kerosene light, she was a sight that, at least momentarily, might have given the white vigilantes pause. Light complexioned, with thick hair flowing to her waist, Miss Little stood taller than the average man of her day, at more than 5 feet 8 inches, and she was pregnant. She was big. Wilfred said years later she was expecting at any time. "Y'all better get out of town," said the man in front, exclaiming that they did not tolerate troublemakers. Bristling before the young family, the Klansmen clutched their shotguns by the trigger housing and made all kinds of threats. I gotta make sure we've got this, because some of this page, okay, aimed chiefly at the man of the house. The unfolding drama puzzled the eldest child of the household. "I didn't know what to make of it," Wilford recalled. "My mother was angry, so naturally I'm angry too. My mother is challenging him, verbally. She never used any profanity." Still, several of the men waved gun barrels toward the door as another spurred his horse forward, shaking his torch at the defiant Miss Little. "My mother kept arguing," Wilford said. The Klan leader got mad. He took the butt of his rifle and knocked the front window out. My baby brother Filbert started crying in the back room, and 3-year-old Hilda tugged at her mother's house dress. In fear of the gunmen gripped Miss If fear of the gunmen gripped Miss Little, her children detected no sign in her tone and body language, as Wilford recalled the incident years later. The children, in fact, drew lasting strength from the manner in which their mother stood her ground that spring evening before the bullying white strangers on horseback. However, contrary to his initial impressions, Wilfred would conclude later that it helped greatly that his father was indeed not at home. Eventually, the armed knights of the Klan jerked their horses around in apparent frustration, dipped their torches, and without firing a shot, galloped away as dusk turned into pitch darkness. Their memories of the standoff, dangerous and yet alluring to the youngsters at the time, would trouble them for the rest of their lives, especially the keenly observant Wilfred. After he learned that such Ku Klux Klan visits often ended with roped Negro bodies dangling from a tree, flashbacks of the terror would bolt him awake from youthful sleep some nights. And this eldest child of the little family would later recount for the author poignant details about that fateful evening. After the vigilantes rode away, the pregnant mother of three did not consider calling police to be a viable option because Negroes understood that city officials generally approved of such Klan activity. Instead, she sought help from prosperous acquaintances, using their two-piece candlestick telephone to get word of the emergency to her preacher husband, some 500 miles away in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The Reverend Errol Little booked the next train back to Omaha, having moved away from their first cramped quarters on the northern strip of city blocks designated for Negroes. The growing family now lived in a rented farmhouse among white neighbors. In the Omaha of 1920s, this exercise of open housing was a civil right reserved strictly for Caucasians. However, violating the policy was in keeping with the rebellious spirit of the pioneering young Negro couple. Their breach did not go unnoticed by white residents, including the Klan. Upon discovering the treachery of the white property owners who had rented to the Littles, neighbors turned downright unneighborly, except for an immigrant Hungarian family, who, despite icy stares of others, befriended the Littles even as they were openly harassed as Negro troublemakers. All across America during the first half of the 20th century, such was the treatment of blacks who dared exercise civil rights reserved for whites only. In the North, the racial divide was de facto and maintained at key levels of society, including housing, education, employment, restaurants, nightclubs, hotels, bars, hospitals, and even church services. In the South, where racial segregation was de jure, Jim Crow laws codified by state and county governments posted dire whites only warning signs everywhere and fielded brutal sheriff's departments to enforce the policy, with unofficial assistance from vigilantes such as the Ku Klux Klan. Upon arriving back in Omaha, Reverend Little paced the floor as his young wife detailed how she and the children had weathered the raid of the White Knights. Dark-skinned and standing more than 6 feet 4 inches, the Reverend had a glass eye from an accident back home in Georgia when a nail had pitched up from an errant blow of his hammer and struck his left eye. Despite the lawlessness of the Klan ordeal, Reverend Little agreed that calling the Omaha police about the vigilante raid would have gone for naught. Already the trek in town for household goods and services by borrowed horse and wagon had been risky for the isolated family. Now the Klan visit had rendered their very home unsafe. Under this uniquely American cloud of racial dread, the Reverend Earl Little and his pregnant wife Louise, the parents of daughters, the parents of daughter Hilda and sons Wilfred and Filbert, awaited the birth of their fourth child. Louise Norton Little arrived by horse and wagon at Omaha's University Hospital and was signed in at the admissions office as West Indian housewife. She was attended by Dr. W.A. Lear, a white obstetrician. As such, state institutions of the day did not grant practice privileges to Negro physicians. After a routine delivery that Tuesday evening, Dr. Lear applied the requisite water solution to each eye of the infant and declared him alive and healthy. It was 10:29 p.m. on Monday 19th, 1925. The parents named their baby boy Malcolm. This future icon of the global human rights struggle was the fetus that Miss Louise Little was carrying that night the Klan terrorized her family at the doorstep. Some years later, his brother Wilford would render detailed recollections about the family to the author, many hours of which were taped, recorded over a period of 5 years, along with in-depth interviews with 3 younger siblings and telephone chats with 2 others. This material, including some closely held secrets, was supplemented by accounts from other relatives, neighbors, teachers, classmates, acquaintances, friends, enemies, as well as attributed accounts from the autobiography of Malcolm X, all verified by official records where possible and synthesized as the main body of the present story of this special son of pioneering Midwest family who would become a major figure in the 20th century American history. Baby Malcolm was the 7th of Earl's children. The first 3 were offspring from a previous marriage in rural Georgia, where kinfolks and Father Earl occasionally would boast that the birth sequence of this new boy child placed him under a good luck sign. This charm digit, as old as the Bible, was popularized by Negro folklore of the time, as it would be later in blues lyrics such as the Hoochie Coochie Man, who was said to have been born on the 7th hour, on the 7th day, on the 7th month, 7 doctors say. He was born for good luck. This fortuitous omen, however, did not attend baby Malcolm in Omaha because he was but the 4th child born to Earl and Louise. The infant did not attract attention of University Hospital, where the offspring of Negro couples of extreme light and dark skin tones aroused curiosity among nurses and staffers on the ward. His paternal relatives in Georgia took pride in producing children tall in stature and dark in hue, and this despite the complexion of Earl's mother, Ela, who was light complexioned with gray eyes. Word circulated on the University Hospital ward, however, that baby Malcolm looked like his own mother, Louise, with a milky complexion and near blue eyes that matched his mother's when she was a child. Shalom, peace, and blessings. Welcome. In a more practical way, Father Earl welcomes his new son as a pair of future hands for the plow and other chores around the farmhouse. For the moment, though, baby Malcolm, and I can hardly see this part right here. Let me see if I can I lift this up a little bit? Hold on a second here. Just a little bit. Okay. For the moment, though baby Malcolm was another mouth to be fed by parents who were see this line is kind of is that ecking? A-K-I-N-G. Oh, yeah. Eking out a living under the dismissive eyes of white neighbors, indifferent Omaha officials, and now the gun barrel of vigilantes on horseback. Experiencing Klan terror firsthand was unnerving to the family, but the father had grown up hearing widely circulated accounts of deadly Ku Klux Klan lynching in the Deep South. The father had been born early little in Butler, Georgia in 1890. He was the son of former slaves, whom only a generation earlier the state had forbade to be taught to read or write, subjecting violators to a $500 fine, lashings, and possible imprisonment. Attending one of the few rural schools for post-slavery children, young Early completed the third grade, was subsequently trained as a carpenter and brick mason, and then entered the ministry as a Baptist preacher. His early schooling came just as the U.S. Supreme Court sanctified Jim Crow laws in its separate but equal Plessy versus Ferguson decision of 1896. It would be more than half a century before Georgia Governor Lester Maddox wielded an axe handle in defiance of the court's 1954 decision reversing Plessy and outlawing school segregation. Under the racist Jim Crow system, the education of Negroes was woefully thwarted by white government officials mandating grossly desperate and insufficient expenditures, as well as out-of-date books, cast-offs from old white schools, poorly trained teachers, and scant job opportunities after graduation. Accordingly, although quite ambitious, smart, and enterprising, Earl, as he was known outside of the family, and Negroes of similar stature, including key members of his family in rural Georgia, were not afforded much chance at formal education. In the early 20th century, most black Southerners resided on land farmed for its white owners, charged exorbitant rents. These sharecroppers were extended credit for household goods, food, and clothing, all charged against labor on a farm and in the kitchen. Harvest time usually found the bookkeeping white landowners taking the hog share of the crops. Disputes were put down by brute white force that could all too often turn deadly. Saddled with unpaid bills on the ledgers, the sharecroppers were essentially tied to the tenant farms under a post-slavery system of debt peonage. Word of such debtors skipping to the north brought down terror raids upon their families, as did other perceived slights. Young Malcolm's paternal grandparents, John and Ella Little, were something of a rarity among Negroes in turn of the century Georgia, in that they owned land. They passed along their drive to own property to their son Early, and he to his children, most especially to Malcolm's older half sister Ella. Later, this anointed eldest child would recall how her traveling evangelist dad, ever enterprised, I'm sorry, ever enterprising, used to occasionally exhibit her at various churches to emphasize a preaching point from the Bible. I'd have my little chair on the pulpit, Eli fondly recollected. During Earl's adolescence in Georgia, he was, it was said, quite reluctant to yield to the tradition of Southern etiquette that required Negroes to accede to total white dominance. State law defined the suppressed class as anyone with any ascertainable trace of Negro blood. And the statute segregated the races on public transport and in prisons, mental hospitals, barber shops, pool halls, and public schools. A poll tax made Negro voting almost non-existent in their home state. Young girls natural rebelliousness attracted the notice of local white merchants, and as was the pattern of the day, he was tagged by the dangerous sobriquet uppity nigger. Later, when he was a young husband, Reverend Little's intransigent occasion brushed with the law. This couple This, coupled with frequent household squabbles with his first wife, Daisy Mason, placed him at odds with his more servile in-laws, according to his two sisters. Conflicts flared openly between the two families and rendered the marriage rocky throughout. Moreover, Earl's alarming tendency to backtalk to whites in public reportedly placed the uppity nigger preacher in danger wherever he traveled throughout the South. According to relatives, Early's father, Pa John, conforming to the pattern of concerned Negro parents of the times, advised that his uppity son, for safety's sake, should gather his family and leave Georgia, and for that matter, the South. Eventually, the young father did just that, departing abruptly, although without his wife of almost 10 years and their three children, Ela, Mary, and Earl Jr. Landing a job in Philadelphia, the restless young carpenter preacher was soon exposed to the secular teaching of Marcus Garvey, whose Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA, sought to uplift the race globally. Reverend Little was deeply impressed. The message of the campaigning Marcus Garvey struck Earl as just the tonic for an independent-minded Negro in search of himself. It was not so much the UNIA's global outreach to Africa that finally persuaded young preacher as it was the group's uncompromising tenet that the individual free himself from the strictures of the psyche imposed by white racist domination in America, and that Negroes demand equal treatment across the board. The peripatetic Reverend Earl Little, separated from the family he had abandoned in Georgia, occasionally went to Canada to hear Marcus Garvey speak, and once, when he was between two jobs, sought a brief respite from U.S. racism as a UNIA camp follower. In the Commonwealth nation of Canada, the Caribbean UNIA members as British subjects. Wow, they're in Canada. They're okay. I didn't realize they had something in Canada. In the Commonwealth nation of Canada, the Caribbean UNIA members as British subjects could move about more freely. At a UNIA meeting during a visit to Montreal, Earl met a handsome 20-year-old woman from the tiny Caribbean islands of Grenada, Louise Helen Langdon Norton, who worked as a seamstress and housekeeper for white families. She had migrated to this Quebec city in 1917 with her uncle, Egerton Langdon, who had introduced her to the teaching of Marcus Garvey. The tall, light-complexioned Louise had attended a religious school under the English system that stressed geography, mathematics, and language skills. She spoke English with a Caribbean accent as well as Spanish and a smattering of French. Never having known her Scottish father, Louise was raised by a stern grandmother, Mary Jane Langdon, and aunt Gertrude, after her unmarried mother Edith died during the birth of her third child. After a brief courtship, the 29-year-old separate father of three, who some relatives say never divorced his first wife, Daisy, took the younger Grenadian as his bride. In May 1919, 6 months after the war had ended in Europe, soon after the couple left Canada and settled in Philadelphia, where their first child, Wilfred, was born on February 12th, 1920. A few months later, Earl, shifting among several jobs, took his young family to Georgia to meet his parents and siblings. Louise was in her second pregnancy. Relatives noted that Earl had landed a young beauty, but assumed that the neatly dressed, well-spoken Caribbean bride made American citizen, the product of 5 years of strict Anglican education, was a snob not much given to hard work. They were wrong in this assumption because Louise, as a youngster, had been entrusted with running the household of her grandmother and aunt. Housework, responsibility, and authority enforced with corporal punishment were nothing new to the West Indian mother of a growing family. When mixing it up, especially with the womenfolk, Louise was careful to concentrate her talk on what they had in common, such as housekeeping, child rearing, and racial discrimination. And she wisely did more listening than talking. In short order, Louise also rolled up her sleeves and quarterly dispelled all notions of sloth without thoroughgoing housework that won over her husband's family, all except for the wife from Reverend Little's first marriage and her family. The Masons were understandably livid that Early had the temerity to parade his pregnant new bride before the family he had abandoned for parts unknown. The first wife, according to their daughter Ela, threatened to stage a Daisy Louise showdown during the family visit. Once again, Early's father intervened to preserve peace at home and the family's reputation downtown. Just as when the son first migrated north, Pa John feared that his son's uppity rebelliousness was certain to attract local law enforcement and possibly a visit from white vigilantes. In due course, Early and his pregnant wife and son headed back north. And when his bachelor brother James landed a job at a large meat packing company in the Midwest where jobs were plentiful, Earl and Louise were invited to join him in Omaha. The migration of Negroes to the city was the largest on the Great Plains at the time. With 10,315 such residents, Omaha was second only to Los Angeles in cities west of the Missouri River in terms of black population. As a frontier settlement in 1854, Omaha had been named after a Native American tribe that the U.S. government restricted at the time to a reservation in northeastern Nebraska. In the Sioux language of the tribe, Omaha means those going against the current. The fate that had befallen this tribe stood as an ominous warning to residents who challenged the federal government. It's not a stretch, however, to note that the determined resistance of Earl and Louise to racist suppression matched the spirit of the Omaha tribe. Nor is it an exaggeration to suggest that the couple's fierce determination against overwhelming odds would be sharply reflected in their fourth born child, Malcolm. While constituting only 5% of the city population, the strictly segregated Negro community of Omaha supported 40 small Protestant churches, some 100 family businesses, including a few doctors, lawyers, and dentists, and 24 elite secret social clubs and organizations. Feature stories about the activities of these groups, as well as news of the entire community, could be found in the Weekly Monitor, the local Negro newspaper. And community activists had established in 1912 the first chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, west of the Mississippi River. The civil rights group, however, was severely challenged as racial tensions initially flared in Omaha when local meatpacking firms in 1917 recruited Negroes as strikebreakers, pitting these longtime Americans against immigrant workers from Europe. These Caucasians had not themselves been integrated as fully fledged white Americans. However, they had gained the upper hand in the workplace by controlling the unions as well as the crime syndicate in town. As white Americans on probation, these foreign-born Europeans, mainly Irish Catholics, cracked down brutally on incoming Negro citizens from the Deep South, as if such behavior would speed their acceptance by the dominant native-born whites. In 1918, the Irish hold on the workplace was threatened by Edward Parson Smith, a formal-minded Anglo candidate, defeated the longtime machine mayor, who had been more tolerant of the unions and the criminal syndicate. These contending political forces, with Negroes trapped as the consensus underclass, created an explosive atmosphere in the city. And the next year, when a frenzy of race rioting was sweeping the nation, a local killing was so gruesome that it got this Nebraska city featured on the lynching map under what historians labeled the Omaha incidents. Just seeing something here. Okay. Okay. As returning military veterans competed for jobs and housing amid major population shifts, including the Great Migration, in which some 500,000 blacks moved from the South to northern and Midwest cities, racial violence went full throttle. Having fought for democracy in Europe, where they were treated more equally, Negro soldiers pushed for their civil rights at home, thereby rocking the pre-war status quo. Even before the signing of the Versailles Treaty, which officially concluded the war with Germany, a race riot led by U.S. sailors erupted in Charleston, South Carolina. During this melee on May 10th, 1919, 3 Negroes were killed, with injuries on both sides. In Chicago that July, a week-long explosion flared at a segregated beach, with 38 deaths, some 15 of them whites, as Negroes fought back. We return fighting, wrote W.E.B. Du Bois in the May issue of The Crisis, the NAACP magazine. The Windy City riot was part of a firestorm that hit some 33 cities, with mainly white mobs attacking Negroes, according to the U.S. Department of Labor. Hundreds were left homeless, and about 175 were killed, including at least 76 Negroes who were lynched, 11 of them war veterans. Writer James Weldon Johnson dubbed this bloody conflagration the Red Summer, even though it flamed on into October. Negroes campaigning for equality were said by some federal officials to be under the influence of the Bolsheviks, who had recently staged the Russian Revolution, giving rise to America's first so-called Red Scare, which replaced anti-German sentiment among whites in the United States. The American Negro returning from abroad would be our greatest medium for conveying Bolshevism to America, President Woodrow Wilson reportedly told his personal physician. Very interesting, that part right there. Dr. Carrie Grayson, the French people have placed the Negro soldier in France on an equality with the white man. I'm going to say that again. The French people have placed the Negro soldier in France on an equality with the white man, Grayson wrote in his diary, adding that President Wilson stated, and it has gone to their heads. The Red Summer spark that touched off the racial explosion in Omaha was more typical of a Deep South powder keg. In fact, the origins of this race riot were part of a familiar trope of American history. 19th Years ago, Agnes Lobeck reported that she and her boyfriend were attacked walking home from a movie theater on September 25, 1919. A Negro jumped out of the weeds at us, she said, and robbed the couple at pistol point. According to newspaper accounts, Lobeck claimed that the man dragged me into the weeds by my hair and assaulted me. I tried to scream, she said, but he covered my mouth with his left hand while adroitly holding the pistol on her crippled boyfriend, Milton Hoffman. As with the other Red Summer allegations in the news, local authorities made little effort to check the validity of the white accuser's sketchy claims. Black Beast, screamed the subheadlines of the first day story in the notoriously race-baiting Omaha Daily Bee. In its front page story tagged the unconfirmed episode, the most daring attack on a white woman ever perpetrated in Omaha. The very next day, Will Brown, a Negro man of about 40 with acute rheumatism, was pointed out as suspicious by a white resident who had observed that Brown, a packing house worker from Cairo, Illinois, was renting a room at a woman's home nearby. Police officers brought Brown to Lobeck's residence as a possible suspect. Already, a raucous crowd, whipped up by the Omaha Bee's yellow journalism, had created a circus atmosphere outside the teenager's home where she supposedly identified the startled middle-aged black laborer as the guilty man, although police and U.S. Army reports later indicated that the teenager did not make a positive identification of her alleged attacker. Straight away, the 250 white residents camped outside the Lobeck home, bolted into action. "Don't take that man to jail," the white mob shouted, according to one of the newspaper accounts. "Let us have him. The courts won't punish him. We will." Bent on making the arrest, the city police called in the reinforcements, but barely managed to extricate Brown from a group attempting to loop a rope around his neck. Several men even landed a few blows about the head and shoulders of the cops as others punctured the tires of their patrol cars. Seems like some behaviors never change. The officers finally managed to escort the Negro suspect to booking at court and later to jail. Headed by the reform-minded Mayor Smith, City Hall was despised by the mostly Irish mob, which had been lathered up by the news reports of local crime syndicate leaders, simmering tensions in the workplace, and deep-seated fear and hatred of Negroes said to be after their jobs. And now they're women. The racial horrors of the Red Summer played out in cities from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to New London, Connecticut, across the Texarkana, Texas. Texarkana, Texas. That's where those three girls, just a little interjection, that's where those three girls' bodies were found in that pond that I was talking about last night. Texarkana, Texas. Anyway, continuing, just little side note there. The racial horrors of the Red Summer played out in the cities from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, in New London, Connecticut, and across. I want to get that from it. And across Texarkana, Texas, were so well rehearsed that the innocent Will Brown had already been convicted of a capital crime against the white womanhood by the Omaha press. Indeed, local working class whites pursued the meatpacking worker as a handy scapegoat for their own problems, to say nothing of their insecurities about the black sexual powers. We need to get that from it. At 3 p.m. That Sunday, some 200 boys aged 14 to 20 from the Bancroft School, which Lowback had attended, were intercepted by detectives as they marched on the Douglas County Courthouse. According to Omaha's Ride and Story and Picture, a 26-page pamphlet reporting on the incident, one of the leaders reportedly rode a horse from whose saddle hung a long rope. Within 2 hours, the two boys' brigade was joined by thousands of white adults, mainly immigrants, who had pushed one policeman through a glass door, assaulted two others, and rushed the courthouse. When the policemen trained a water hose in the crowd, they countered with bricks and sticks and broke nearly every window on the south side as they swarmed about the courthouse on all sides. "We are going to teach these Negroes a lesson," said one man. A local newspaper reported. The crowd was estimated at 10,000 to 20,000 people, angry, mainly Caucasian immigrant men and women. It seemed as if all of the white Omaha save authorities was united in this bloodthirsty pursuit of a Negro American citizen, innocent by every standard of a lawful society. The residents pillaged nearby hardware stores and pawn shops, stealing more than 1,000 revolvers and shotguns, according to police records. As the sheriff and his deputies periodically dodged bullets themselves, the irate workers and idlers torched the lower floors of the courthouse with gasoline. Inside the stately courthouse, Will Brown moaned to Sheriff Mike Clark, "I am innocent. I never did it. My God, I am innocent." The more reliable Morning World Herald told its readers, and a local reporter and attorney who interviewed Brown in jail agreed with a physical examination report that Brown was too twisted by rheumatism to assault anyone. The white mob made clear its non-negotiable demand. Prisoner Brown was to be taken from the fifth floor jail cell and handed over to them. When Police Chief Marshal Eberstein failed to quell the crowd, Mayor Smith, whom the immigrants in the mob blamed for their labor discontent with Negroes, emerged from the flaming courthouse at about 11 that evening and pled let me start that again because I couldn't. The white mob made clear its non-negotiable demand. Prisoner Brown was to be taken from the fifth floor jail cell and handed over to them. When Police Chief Marshal Eberstein failed to quell the crowd, Mayor Smith, whom the immigrants in the mob blamed for their labor discontent with Negroes, emerged from the flaming courthouse at about 11 that evening and pled for order. Someone hit Smith on the head with a baseball bat. Another man slipped the noose of a rope around the mayor's neck, and the crowd dragged him away. Several spectators wrested the mayor from his captors and placed him in a police automobile. Within minutes, the crowd recaptured its victim, roped him once again, and managed nearly to suspend the body of Omaha's chief executive from a traffic signal tower. On the verge of strangulation, the dangling Mayor Smith was dramatically rescued by special agents driving through the throng in a high-powered automobile. They rushed the mayor to the hospital where, after 2 days on the critical list, he would recover. One not-so-lucky 17-year-old was shot dead while leading a gang to the fourth floor of the courthouse. A block away, James Heichel, a 34-year-old businessman, was shot dead by 2 stray bullets. Throughout the melee, Negroes were dragged from streetcars and beaten, while other such unsuspecting pedestrians were chased down on sight. well-meaning whites attempting to render aid were themselves battered about. Meanwhile, the gasoline-fed flames lapped up the side of the 5-story building where policemen, court officers, and 121 prisoners had fled to the rooftop. Despite cries for mercy, the mob blocked all attempts to hoist rescue ladders, and they severed water hoses that firemen hooked up to nearby hydrants. As the roof weakened under the heat, the women prisoners were allowed to depart the building. However, the men trapped by the inferno yelled through the billowing smoke for help as some of the married officers reportedly placed goodbye telephone calls to their wives and families. "Bring Brown with you," shouted one man. "You can come down." The bloodthirsty mob had clearly regained its singular focus on the nigger, with human incineration a distinct possibility. Trapped officials on the 4th floor tossed down 3 notes. The judge says he will give up Negro Brown. He is in dungeon. One piece scrawled. There are 100 white prisoners on the rooftop. Save them. Another note read, "Come to the 4th floor of the building and we will hand the Negro over to you." Then, with automobile spotlights trained on the burning courthouse, 2 nimble young men with a shotgun and a coil of rope scaled the West Hall to the 4th floor to the accompaniment of thunderous cheering, punctuated by fusillade of shots. Wow, I'm hoping that as I'm reading this, you guys are able to sort of envision the madness that's going on there in this time. I mean, I'm just seeing like this. I mean, I believe we've seen something, maybe not of this magnitude, but we've seen some similar behavior in folks. I mean, when you think about that, this is an interjection, a side note. When you think about the raid of the White House and something of that nature. Anyway, a mighty roar went up from the crowd with word that Will Brown had been captured. Reported Omaha's riot and story and picture, which was published that year by the Educational Publishing Company. This most destructive riot by the lawless white mob was reported in the journal as having been sparked by a boyish sense of mistaken chivalry. And in a mere 8-line paragraph, the pamphlet summarized what the mob did next to their Negro captive. According to the newspaper accounts, some 11 hours past church service, the white rioters, still dressed in their Sunday fancy, proceeded to beat Will Brown bloody as he proclaimed his innocence. Shredding his clothes from his torso, they mercilessly whipped the near-naked Negro, who pled for his life as the mob cheered. The captive was then dragged to the higher of 2 lampposts on the south side of the smoldering courthouse, where several immigrant attackers slid the knotted noose around the neck of this American citizen vaguely accused. Then, without so much as a rhetorical question about his guilt, they slung the cord over the arm of the pole and jerked the middle-aged arthritic laborer off the ground. The abrupt snapping of live human vertebrae, a sound like no other, brought a blood-chilling hush upon the crowd. The limp body of Will Brown began to spin rapidly from the centripetal force of the hoisting. It steadied only when gunmen fired a volley of some 100 bullets into the roped torso. The eerie scene moved the white mob to rapture. No other word seemed appropriate. Whooping catcalls rang out like hosannas in a church revival, with accompaniment of wild gunfire resounding throughout the smoke-filled Omaha Plaza at the approach of midnight. In due course, a few raw-boned young men lowered Brown's stiff body on the tout. rope on the tout rope and tied it to the rear bumper of an automobile. A driver gunned the engine, and what was left of the cadaver was driven through the wildly cheering throng of Omaha revelers, eager as hyenas at an antelope kill. At the intersection of rampage cluttered 17th and Dodge Streets, several other men hustled up kerosene from nearby danger signal lamps used for street repairs, and in the autumn hush of midnight, a few pale, sweating attackers doused Brown's body on a wood pile with coal oil and set the corpse ablaze. Dozens of sporty youths in peaked caps and sweaters, along with church-going men in wool suits, neckties, and felt hats, swaggered about the killing ground, posing for photographs with the shredded body of their victim. Wide-eyed and eager white residents of Omaha were photographed in full celebration of their naked human sacrifice roasting on an open pyre. The lynching of Will Brown was witnessed by one 14-year-old who would grow up to become a leading Hollywood actor portraying quiet, quintessential American heroes. His movie roles included young Mr. Lincoln, as well as the junior who saves a Latino man from an all-white jury's death sentence in 12 Angry Men. Henry Fonda recalled that as a teenager, he peered down at the handiwork of his neighbors that night from the second floor window of his father's printing shop. My hands were wet and there were tears in my eyes. The adult Fonda said of this incident of his childhood. Presumably, the youngster never left his perch for the hours-long lynching episode, reportedly standing the entire time alongside his father, William. When it was all over, we went home. All I could think of was that young black man dangling at the end of a rope. By 3 a.m. on Monday, September 29th, federal troops of the 20th Infantry restored order by setting up a machine gun and 1-pound cannon emplacements in the downtown business district and as a precaution in the Black Belt zone, or in the Black Belt section of the town. The troops were under the command of General Leonard Wood, who 2 decades earlier had led Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Riders during the Spanish-American War and had been a contender for the Republican presidential nomination in 1916. Omaha is not ashamed, but Omaha is frightened, wrote the New York Times, which reported that at least 2,000 Negroes have left the city by railroad. A headline that day in the Omaha Morning World Herald, which would win a 1920 Pulitzer Prize for its editorial, Law in the Jungle, read, "Frenzied thousands join an orgy of blood and fire." Dear family, we're going to stop right there at crowds search through streets attacking Negroes everywhere. We're going to stop right there. We're going to stop at that part for tonight, for this evening. Be sure to be on the lookout for the next live Midnight Thought Talk. It's some very important elements that I need to deal with. Like I said, this is an age where accountability is of utmost importance when it comes to protecting our honor, protecting our image, protecting our legacy, our story. And when people who do not have the right to behave in inappropriate ways and say inappropriate things about us do so, they should be called out and they should be identified. See, there's a thing here that I believe in. I believe in protecting our honor as a people. That means when we have issues, when we have problems, that we deal with it with inside the family. I don't afford this saying outside of that. Respect is there, but respect outside of that circle, outside of that cipher, the cipher of the family, is earned. Is not a privilege, is not a prerequisite. As I often say, when you meet someone, you greet them with peace. But that's a double-edged sword. That means that I want you to have peace with my presence with you. I also want to maintain my own peace. But at the end of the day, if I'm not able to maintain my own peace, or you violate my peace, then I will protect my peace from your violation. So there are some things that we're going to have to deal with. There are behaviors that, we've sat long enough accepting. And I believe we've reached a point in our time, in our story, where we can be silent no more. People need to understand the weight, the gravity of what we've gone through our story in time. And they need to understand that you can't just say whatever you want while riding our backs towards your success, and then expect us to ignore your mischief, to ignore the wickedness that comes out of your mouth. So you must be held to account. So that is Midnight Thought Talk. So 12 a.m. For now, this concludes this particular Black We Speak, The Dead Are Arising, The Life of Malcolm X by Payne, Tamara Payne. And we are leaving off at page 30. Yep, page 30. So when we come back, we'll begin with that same headline. Frenzied thousands join an orgy of blood and fire. Crowds search through streets, attacking Negroes everywhere. So, dear family, I appreciate that you have taken the time to join me in reading this hefty reading. It's definitely a reading that I appreciate reading with you, and I hope that you were able to benefit in some way and gain, furtherance and insight. Yeah, I petition that you show your support to the platform, Soul Journey of Life. You see the Cash App there, the Light Dome, and your support is definitely appreciated. Asante Sana in advance. What year was that? I believe that was like in around 1918, somewhere in that time frame they were talking about. You have to play it back again because some of the years were mentioned, but I believe that was somewhere in the time frame of like 1918 or 19, maybe 1919. I can't recall exactly, but look back into the live. And with that said, family, we're going to take our time out for the time being. Check back at midnight. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace and blessings, dear family. Hotep, shalom. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.
Soul Journey of Light, Conscious Black Social Media.
The light dome.